Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel and I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. So today I want to cover a very specific type of immigration situation, and that is investment visas. This has actually been quite a hot topic lately because there are discussions around perhaps people buying their citizenship or buying their ability to enter a country. So let's talk about investment visas in general. So immigrant investor programs are commonly known as golden visas, golden passports, or citizenship by investment, and many more terms. In essence, immigrant investor programs allow immigrants to bypass typical visa and residency permit channels by injecting a substantial amount of cash into some sector of the receiving economy. So depending on the program, investors may have to put money into private business, private real estate, public enterprises, or government bonds. Investment programs typically grant either citizenship by investment or residency by investment. So this means that the successful applicant would gain citizenship directly, or that these successful applicants are either afforded permanent residency or temporary residency with a path to permanent residency. So let's look a little bit at the historical background of investor visas. So the first cash for passport programs originated in the 1980s in the Pacific and Caribbean microstates. So these early programs were also vulnerable to abuses due to lack of due diligence, and such programs were associated with fraud and money laundering. Investors didn't even have to visit the issuing country, much less reside in them. But the original reason that these countries were offering such a thing was trying to inject more cash into their small economies. Now, in the 1990s to 2000, we saw a more kind of legitimization of this cash for passport programs from a policy perspective. Two of the world's largest immigrant receiving countries, Canada and the United States, implemented programs during this period. So in the United States, a green card was issued to private business investors, and in Canada, permanent residency was issued to immigrants purchasing government bonds. Now, the emergence of this kind of cash for passport in Europe situation has definitely happened. Roughly half of member states have some sort of investor visa program. EU countries offering citizenship for investment are granting immigrant investors the full rights that native EU citizens enjoy. So that is freedom to live, work, and study in European countries. Now, there are a number of arguments for and against investor visas. So let's first look at the example or the question of, should citizenship or residency be a market commodity? So this is often a question that is asked around the investor visa. So those who say yes say that allowing market choices to determine citizenship creates a favorable immigrant selection effect for destination countries. So for instance, this is clearly a free market approach, since the rationale behind it is that kind of paternalistic oversight from governments does not maximize immigrants' benefit for the host countries, but lets the market decide instead. So this is really commodifying citizenship and identifies immigrants who value citizenship the most because they will pay the most for it. Or it is actually identifying those who have the most ability to pay for citizenship. So those who are against this, or those who say that citizenship or residency shouldn't be a market commodity, say that this approach doesn't account for inequality and it's prohibitive to effects on mobility. Others say that market transactions do not address intangible citizenship aspects like political responsibilities and interpersonal relationships and the ability to, for instance, integrate later. Now, there are also others that want to discuss whether or not the investments actually generate the necessary public revenue for small economies. So those that are pro-immigrant investment visas say that yes, public investments can increase government's ability to boost state revenue and initiate development projects. So St. Kitts and Nevis experienced these positive effects from their Citizenship for Sale program, which is the oldest of its kind, starting in 1984. But these effects were seen after a legal team revamped their program only in the early 2010s. So you really have to be careful with a program like this as to whether or not it's really going to bring those benefits and how sustainable that is. So of course there are those that do not believe that this investment generates the necessary public revenue for small economies. Many countries grapple with transparency issues regarding the invested cash, and it's often the case that this is not very sustainable. So you might see a good injection of cash in one year, but maybe not in the next years. And especially with more and more countries offering investment visas, then there's more competition. And that doesn't mean that you're going to see those same injections of cash on a regular basis. So why apply for investment visas? Well, there are a couple of possibilities here, and there are those who apply for an investment visa that have no intention of actually migrating, or at least not migrating initially, and then there are those people that have the intention of migrating at the same time as they apply for the investment visa. So for those who don't migrate at the same time that they get the investment visa, for them this is almost comparable to when people retroactively acquire citizenship with no intention to relocate in those countries. So people might do this as an extra insurance against misfortune. They might do this to expand visa-free travel and residency freedom. So basically they want the positive aspects that new passport might give them. So for those people, though, that decide to actually migrate with their investment visa, this migration to the invested destination is sometimes temporary, but it gives them enough time to apply for permanent residency or perhaps citizenship in some cases, at which point this type of investing migrant may return to their origin or travel to a third country. So this is also motivated by destination country factors like perhaps a higher quality of life, better education, or political certainty. And these motivations can outweigh losses investors may experience in destinations such as higher taxes and lower returns on investments. It's really because they're getting these extra also other benefits that make them want to move to those countries. So let's look at a couple of examples now of countries that offer these types of visas. So let's look at St. Kitts and Nevis. So they have an investment type plus an amount that they need to choose. So the non-refundable contribution to the Sustainable Growth Fund is $150,000 plus a processing fee. Additional dependents increase the investment threshold to $195,000 plus processing fees for a single applicant with a spouse and 2 dependents. So you can see here that one possible way to get the investment visa is just to give a one-time clear donation into the Sustainable Growth Fund of the country. Another possibility is a real estate investment. This includes hotel shares, condos, and villas. They must invest $200,000 that is possible to resell after 7 years, or they must invest $400,000 that they can resell after 5 years. So again, you can just put an injection of funds directly into the Sustainable Growth Fund, or you can invest in property. So there are a number of benefits for people to actually receive the citizenship from St. Kitts. The passport gives visa-free access to over 100 countries, and depending on the original country that migrant is coming from, this may expand the mobility options greatly for that person. There are some restrictions, though. There is a compulsory insurance, at least for real estate investments, but that isn't too much. So now let's turn to an example in Europe. So here there is citizenship plus an actual residency requirement for this investor visa. So looking at Malta, we have, there are 3 factors that are necessary to be able to get an investment visa. They need to contribute to the National Development and Social Fund. So the main applicant has to invest 600,000 euros and have 3 years of residency, or invest 750,000 euros with only 1 year of residency. For the spouse, there needs to be an additional 50,000 euro, and for every dependent child, another additional 50,000 euro. You can also bring dependent parents and grandparents, but that's also another 50,000 euro per person. There's also the purchase or rent of real estate. So there's a 5-year duration of ownership or renting that is required. So purchasing a property for at least 700,000 euro or a minimum annual rent of 16,000 euro. There needs to also be a charity donation in Malta of at least 10,000 euro per applicant to a local nonprofit also. There is also a processing fee that is applied to all applicants. That is also quite high, of around 15,000 euro. So you can see that the investor visa here in Malta is actually quite substantial. So the benefits are, of course, a Maltese passport, which gives visa-free access to 160 plus countries worldwide. It gives EU freedom of movement, so you can live, work, and study, which also applies to all Maltese citizens everywhere in the EU. There are some restrictions, though, also for this visa. You need a clean criminal record, and an extensive background check is done, and you also need to be in good health. Now, there's also a similar investment visa for the United States. So this is a cash investment in commercial and for-profit enterprises specifically. Here you can see the amounts of money that you must invest in the United States, the minimum investment amount, the targeted employment area investment amount, and the high employment area investment amount, depending on the date that the person also applied for this. A targeted employment area can be at the time of investment, or a rural area, or an area that has experienced high unemployment that's defined by at least 150% of the national average unemployment rate at the given time. So you can also see the amounts here are quite high. We're talking over $1 million that needs to be invested. So what are the benefits of this visa? Well, it's a green card directly and permanent residence for the applicant and their dependents. So there are a number of ways that this happens, and the process is not so straightforward. Initially, the investor and the dependents are issued either an EB-5 visa or an entry petition for conditional permanent residency prior to entry, or 2 years of stay. Or there's also 90 days before a 2-year period expires. There must be a petition to change the status from the conditional permanent residency to an unconditional permanent residency. So, but also purchasing property here is not mandatory. It's really about the investment amounts in these commercial for-profit enterprises. So this is really about job creation to a large extent in the United States. So some restrictions also come into play here. So the investment must create or preserve at least 10 full-time jobs. So you can see that this scheme is really, really focused on job creation. Now let's look at one more example in the European Union of Portugal. So there are a number of things that can be done here to get an investor visa. You can contribute at least €1 million to a Portuguese or EU business with presence in Portugal, or create at least 10 jobs in the country. It's also possible to purchase real estate. So you can directly purchase real estate for at least a €500,000, or you can refurbish real estate for at least €350,000. It's also possible to just give €350,000 to a research institution, which can be either public or private, or invest in investment or venture capital funds, or create a commercial society headquartered in the country that creates a minimum of 5 permanent jobs. It's also possible just to give €250,000 to the arts, the national heritage initiatives, or matters of public interest. So there are actually 5 different ways to get an investor visa here in Portugal, with all different conditions and also all varying amounts that need to actually be invested or given or donated in the country. So there are again a number of benefits for people who do this. You have visa exemption for traveling within the Schengen and EU area. Again, access to the complete EU labor market, access to a number of other countries, well, a lot of other countries visa-free, so a lot of visa-free travel. Family reunification is also possible with this visa, so you can bring in family members. And there's also temporary residency. So you may apply for permanent, so this is for temporary residency, and you can apply for permanent residency in accordance with the Citizenship and Nationality Act, and you may apply for citizenship via naturalization. So this doesn't give you citizenship directly, but it absolutely gives you a path to citizenship and a lot of different options to get there. So restrictions here are only third country nationals can apply, so that means not already EU citizens, and you must stay in Portugal for a period of 7 or more days in the first year and 14 or more days in the subsequent years. Although residency, of course, is allowed, you actually don't need to spend a lot of time in Portugal to be able to get this, but you do have to spend some time there. So it was really small economies that originally initiated immigrant investment programs, and with the idea of really trying to inject new cash into the economy. But many of these original programs were plagued by corruption, or at least lack of transparency. And then large immigrant destinations started to legalize this practice when starting their own investment programs. So investment programs are often touted as a selection mechanism for the best immigrants because of their willingness to pay, basically is a proxy for measuring their motivations. And at the same time, you know you're getting relatively rich immigrants who are going to be able to support themselves. And of course, the idea that this just injects extra cash into the economy, in some cases also creating jobs. Governments definitely do enjoy increased public revenue from these programs. However, this approach selects immigrant investors with the highest financial means to migrate. So it's really those with the highest capability to be able to pay for access to the country. Also, some governments do have more improvements to make in terms of investment funds transparency. So where these funds are being used and do they actually benefit the public interest. Investment visas, of course, can range from full citizenship to permanent residency to temporary residency, with then giving access to citizenship perhaps later on. Some of these visas also require residency and some of them don't. So there's really a kind of plethora of different options available. What you also see is that in general, the more attractive the country, the higher the standards are for the investment. So the more money that you have to infuse and the more hoops that you usually need to jump through to be able to get that investor visa. If you're interested, you can check out another video that I recently did on highly skilled migrants, which is also related to investors or investor type visas to some extent. I hope this video was helpful for you. Please leave a comment. Tell us about your experiences also with any of these visas, if you've had experiences with them, or what you think about these visas. Should countries have investor visas? If you like this video, also please like it, subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you don't miss any of my videos that I put out every week. So I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.